Well, hello there again. I am making my very first video where I'm putting up pictures, so I hope it's not boring to look at, but it's really more about the ideas on this one. I want to talk to you about actors and what actors have been through historically. A little history lesson. Up until a certain point, actors were not what we commonly understand now for them to be. Originally, it came from various religious rites, usually involving Dionysus in Greece anyways. I mean, different cultures have always developed some form of acting, but in the classical world, it would have been Thespis that was the first actor, in which we now use the word thespian from that. Thespis did something very different. At the time, there was nobody taking on an individual role. It was people telling a story. Sometimes there was a chorus. Basically what Thespis did for the very first time was to take a role on personally, was to put on a mask, was to basically say, I am this person, and they would wear a mask, and that was the whole thing. And it was actually decades before anybody even thought to add a second actor, but that's going into a whole other thing. And I just wanted to start off with that story because it impresses upon me that there's this whole, at some point something changed in terms of how the story was being told. And the original Greek word for actor was hypocrite, pronounced in modern vernacular, of course, that way. But the term hypocrite really meant, one who puts on a face, one who essentially has that two-facedness, or basically you have the real face and you have the face that you take on as an actor. And of course we can see the tie-in with the modern term hypocrite with that too, which is, you're really saying one thing and you're doing another. So it's just a little interesting history lesson there. The reason I bring this up is there has, for a very long time, historically been a stigma against actors. And the reasons for this are complex. It really is best displayed in the Middle Ages, when actors were thought of as little more than vagabonds, and kind of like we think of as gypsies being regarded now. And surely there was some crossover there as well. But actors were thought of very, very poorly. They weren't allowed to be buried in Christian churches in the Middle Ages. They were rarely, people just wouldn't trust them. They were assuming that they were always trying to rip them off. There was often, homosexuals in there, and prostitutes perhaps, and, a wide variety of disreputable persons. So there was this stigma for a very long time about actors. And I'm coming to a point here. Basically, what I wanted to say is that acting was a stigma. Nobody reputable would do it, but through the work of actors and just from the creation of modern media, acting has come out of the shadows. Acting has become a fairly reputable thing. There's always going to be the parents that are disappointed that their son or daughter didn't go into becoming a lawyer or something like that, but generally you want to become an actor, it's acceptable now. Anyways, the reductions of stigma in that, I bet some of you can see where I'm going with this. If the stigma can be reduced on acting to the point where Hollywood exists and Broadway exists, and there's a whole dramatic industry built up around that is relatively reputable. I mean, there's always, there's sad stories that come out of Hollywood too, aplenty, but when people are being culturally worshipped, when there's a whole, celebrity thing, and you can argue good or bad for that, but you can definitely say the stigma has essentially been defeated. There is no black or white on that. It's basically, okay, there's, it's fine now, it's okay, and we're not going to demonize people for that. And I would suggest that in the long term, such a goal can also be reached with prostitution, in whatever form. I've always thought that destigmatizing is really the major, there's so many aspects of fixing things that are wrong with sex work, that it's a complex issue, obviously, but I think destigmatization is going to do a lot for that, because when you do that, it comes out in the open, it's being talked about, and it's not in the shadows anymore. So just to close off here, I just wanted to basically say that I think it can be done. I think if we can get over a stigma towards acting, we can certainly get over a stigma towards acting in another way. You know, it really, it's funny, you know, you see somebody crying in a Hollywood movie and you don't worry about their welfare, but you see somebody crying in a porn movie, even if after the fact they say, I was perfectly fine with that, and as many, you know, in many BDSM things, there's crying involved, and people will say, oh, she was clearly being abused. Well, sometimes there's acting involved, people, or sometimes it's a particular headspace. The thing that I wanted to basically just get around to is that I think that judging one and not judging the other is purely based on our own societal position at this time. We're used to acting being okay. We're not used to porn or prostitution being okay, so we judge it differently. In other words, we are acting like hypocrites. All of us, societally. You know, some of us less, some of us more. You know, there's a lot of people working to try to destigmatize, and that's, you know, where we should get. But like I said, in the meantime, that's what we're acting like. And that's why the title is what it is, and why I'm tying together the original term hypocrite with, you know, everything, and there we go. Aren't I clever? Anyways, I'm going to be actually continuing this on into a video response to Nuke's video about destigmatization and how she is unable to imagine a world without it. And I'll continue off there.